BK, welcome to the Mindset Advantage podcast. I'm stoked for this conversation today.
DJ, listen, anytime we're having a conversation where two people are going just by letters, right? This is a good spot.
So true, man. I want to start with your mission statement on Twitter. I think it's a great place to open up and get to know you. It says, I'm on a mission to create external excellence and internal fulfillment. Let's start there, BK. What does it mean?
Yeah. Okay. All right. We're gonna dive into the deep end from the very beginning.
Let's go.
So here's the thing. External excellence and internal fulfillment. Ultimately, people may not use that terminology. They use different stuff. That terminology is just what I call it. Everybody wants those two things. Everybody wants something good, whatever it looks like on the outside. For some people, it's, they want a nice farm. For other people, they want to build a business. For other people, they would like, a nice house, maybe a boat to hang out on the weekends, whatever, they're trying to grow a business. They want to make a certain amount of money, whatever external excellence looks like. They want to get in shape, right? And like be beach ready for the summer, external. But then there's internal fulfillment, right? And that is, what do we want, right? We want to feel happy. We want to feel satisfied. We want to be fulfilled in some way, right? And there's like the base stuff, right? We want to be comfortable. We want to be loved, right? We want to have some kind of excitement. We want to feel like we have purpose. But here's the crazy part, DJ. So many people believe passively, despite every lesson of history, that achieving external excellence will give them internal fulfillment. And I think it's easy to kind of write that off and, oh, no, not me. Because you kind of like put away the highest thing. And, we say the phrase like money can't buy happiness. And like, yeah, I know that. But then like you go down to like really practical stuff. Like, oh, once I get in shape, then I will feel good about myself. No, you won't. No, you won't. Like, this is the point. The point of why I separate those is that the pursuit of external excellence and the pursuit of internal fulfillment are separate paths that we need to pursue independently. Now, occasionally they cross over. There's some really fun times. Like it's very fulfilling, right? I'll give you a story literally happened 2 days ago. I guess it's, depending on what the measure is, right? So my best friend has twin stepsons. They're 14, 15 freshmen, and they're coming to visit here out to us in Denver in a couple of weeks. And they call, right? And they're always calling like teenagers do, and they're always talking shit and always doing something, and they always think they can do something, and they've never beaten me in anything physical ever. Like, for years they've been, all come down and race you, we'll all go on vacation together and I'll race you. And they put on their shoes and I go barefoot in the street and I smoke them, right? And I'm 41 here in like 6 weeks. So they call literally this like 2 days ago, they call and they go, hey, we're coming out. We're gonna get a workout in. Like, do you even like have a gym? I was like, I got a gym in my house. And like, you don't even have enough weight for me. I was like, dude, I got more than enough weight for you in my gym. Believe me, trust me. And they're like, well, what do you do? I'm like, I work out. Like, I'm just trying to stay in shape, stay healthy. And he's like, well, what do you bench? I said, I don't bench. He goes, you don't bench? High school, you don't bench? I said, no, I don't bench. I go, I bench like once every 2 weeks, maybe. And I don't even know if I put more than 135 on the bar. Like, because I don't have an interest in it. I'll do push-ups, I'll do burpees, I'll do whatever. I don't bench. And he's like, well, I'm getting close to 225. I think I might be able to get it soon. I was like, oh, okay. I go, I don't think I could get 225. He's like, you can't? I was like, I don't think so. No, probably not. We hung the phone up. And I'm like sitting on my couch and I'm like, could I get 225? And I started getting, I'm like, huh. So I'm like, all right, we're going to go find out. So I walked down to my basement, had my wife. I said, hey, record this because we're going to record whatever happens anyway. I load up 185, easy rep. I load up 205, easy rep. And I'm like, well, shit, here we go. I load up 225, boom, easy rep, right? And I said it to the boys and I'm like, 41 years young, still got it. I don't even bench and I'm throwing up 225. So bring it, right? So the point is this. The point is, does anybody care about me putting up 225? Should I post that on Twitter and celebrate my excellence? No, right? But there is something fulfilling about being almost 41 years old, not benching, and being in enough shape and taking care of myself where I can walk down, put 225 on the bar, put it up one time with relative ease, and then the satisfaction of being able to say, all right, teenagers, like, you're doing all your work, like, I still got you, right? There's just like a little bit of something here. So I share that story because kind of like I'll when I do keynotes, I'll ask people like, what's your low round in golf? And everybody will start to like think about what their low round is. And I'll say, nobody cares. Stop. Nobody cares. It's fulfilling for you. Like my low round of golf is fulfilling for me. A PR might be excellence by some like subjective measure, but maybe not objective. You're probably stronger than I am. Great. But if I hit a PR, that's fulfilling, right? But if I want everybody else to celebrate and respect me for that, now I'm taking that PR and I'm trying to push it external, right? And then I work with a lot of sports teams, and I work with particularly a lot of college football teams. And I ask coaches, you win a championship, how long does that fulfilling and satisfying feeling of winning that, hoisting that trophy up, how long does that last? I literally had a coach last week. He goes, it lasts 2 weeks at most if I am really cultivating it. 2 weeks. You literally like you commit your life to this for a satisfaction that lasts for 2 weeks. Now the trophy's in there forever. They'll always say you were the champion. So that external excellence will always be there. That year we were the best. But the feeling of internal fulfillment is very temporary, far more temporary than most people believe. So the reason that's my mission is that I know both things matter to people, right? People want and need external excellence of some kind, and they need help in pursuing that. And I want to contribute to that. They also want internal fulfillment, and I want to help and contribute to that. And I understand that those are separate. Occasionally they cross over, but it's actually a pretty small portion of life that is excellence and fulfilling at the same time. And I think people get sideways because they have a false expectation that achieving one will naturally give you the other. If I just follow your passion, no, like you can follow your passion and nobody will pay you a dime, right? You just have a cool collection of micro machines or whatever. Like you can follow your passion and build a CrossFit gym, and you're just not very good at it. So you followed your passion, but you're not excellent. So, right? Like that's very real. So I want to help people achieve both and then find as much crossover as they can, but also understand the tools and mechanics for how to do each one individually and be at peace with the fulfillment that does not produce excellence and the excellence that doesn't necessarily give fulfillment, and then help them find other ways to go make that happen. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And I
Yeah.
think what I'm hearing is the external is a little bit more short term. The internal, I would assume, is a little much more long term. You're going to be with you and yourself for the rest of your life. So BK, if we're going to double down on one, I think I want to double down on the internal fulfillment. Walk me
Mm-hmm.
through. This is some big stuff here, but we're only 5 minutes in. Walk me
Sure.
through how to gain a little bit more internal fulfillment. What does that look like? Where do you start?
Mhm.
Walk me through it.
Well, here's the cool part is it can be both, right? I mean, I think, there's short, mid, and long term. Um, why do we sleep in and stay in our comfy, warm bed rather than get up and go do a really hard workout? For fulfillment. Why do we watch TV in an episode rather than read a book? For fulfillment. Now it's a little shorter term, but also, right? Why do we go do a workout? Because nobody has ever gotten up at 5 a.m., done a workout, finished the workout, and said, I feel worse now. And my day, like no one has ever gotten up really early and done a really good workout and then got done and say, I really wish I hadn't done that because now my day is ruined. No, every single time somebody finishes a workout, like there's a sense of really good fulfillment, especially if you can finish a workout before other people have woken up. You're like, damn, I'm like ahead of the world right now, right? Like there's a very real piece in there. So it can be both, right? And external excellence can be, you can do external excellence in a game. You can have a great game and produce. So there's a short, a mid, and a long for both. And obviously sometimes those things come into conflict. But let's go back to the question. How do we start getting closer to internal fulfillment? I think it starts, DJ, with if somebody's like, all right, like I'm really struggling with internal fulfillment, period. Right. I think it starts with two things. Number one, what is your purpose? And that doesn't have to be super sharp and specific, but it does need to be directionally defined. I think sometimes people get way too narrow in their purpose, meaning like their purpose can only be defined by one thing. And I think they confuse strategy for purpose. Purpose is far more directional. And then there's like, hundreds of strategies for fulfilling and achieving that purpose. That's number one. Number two is identifying the beliefs, the principles, and the values that move you down the line of that purpose. How do you activate and live that purpose out? And what's really interesting is that, this is going to be another can that kind of opens that you can decide kind of where we want to go. But what's really interesting is we spend in the business space and the personal space, we spend all of this time trying to define core values, right? And this is kind of I've been talking about this for years, and I'm just getting more definitive about this, and I kind of want to I want to be more disruptive in this. We spend all this time defining values, and I think we need to ask why, right? Why do we define values so heavily? Because I would make the case this: we've never been in an era, and this is no judgment. This is purely like if I'm looking like a scientist, at least in the United States, we have never had a bigger absence or gap of integrity in America than we have today. What do I mean by that? I don't mean we have bad people. What I mean is this: we've never had a bigger gap between the values people claim and the way they actually live their lives. So here's the point. What is it worth if you put in a lot of effort to define your values if you are not disciplined in living those values? I'm not ultimately after, nor do I really care what you believe. I don't really care. I only care to the extent that it affects the way that you act. Because if you believe something internally and it's just private, and by the way, you and I both believe things that are just really private for each of us that we don't really do a whole lot with or say a lot, but it's just an internal belief that we hold. And there's no problem. It doesn't come into conflict because why? You can have your belief and I can have my belief. They can be on polar opposite ends, but until it turns into external behavior that changes the way you speak to me or act to me or what you do with me, have your belief, I have my belief, there is no conflict. So if I define a value, but I don't turn that value into action, what's that worth? It's not really worth anything other than just, I don't know, my own view of myself. I feel better about myself because I say I believe this. So when we define purpose, and then here's the junction point. I think people need to define core values less and core behaviors more. This is what I believe. It's this. This is what I do. This is how I act. This is what I say, what I don't say, what I do, what I don't do, the way I treat people, the way I don't treat people, the decisions I make, the decisions I say no to. Define those, and then back into kind of whatever belief system needs to fuel that, or how you need to change your belief system, whatever. But I don't want people to believe in purpose as much as I want them to act in purpose, right? And I like this, if somebody says, nobody ever says, man, that's such a courageous thought. Think about it, oh my gosh, you're such a courageous thinker. What? No, courage is in action. And so it takes a lot of courage to change ourselves because we deviate. It's a little scary to change who we are, right? It's a little scary to change our behavior patterns and stuff like that. So fulfillment comes from acting in alignment with our purpose. That's where fulfillment ultimately comes from. It's when we have an understanding of our purpose, but we know we're not acting in alignment with it, that the internal tension starts to show up. And that's the feeling and the emotion of guilt, which is a very good emotion, by the way, when it's used appropriately. Because guilt is what tells you you're not being who you say you are. Now, if you try to supply that to me, then you're imposing your beliefs onto me and trying to make me feel guilty. And that's the wrong kind of guilt. Parents do that a lot, unfortunately, unintentionally. But guilt tells me, oh, I said I was going to do this, or I said I'm this kind of person, but now I know I'm not really doing that. And I feel that internal tension. That guilt can push us one of two ways. We can feel really bad about ourselves and then sit down and then let that gap continue and grow, which triples down on our guilt. And then all of a sudden, a lot of other emotions that are very destructive come with it. Or we can take that guilt and say, that's a signal that I am giving to myself that says you're moving away from fulfillment. Right? We look, when we say we're going to work out and then we sleep in, we feel guilty. Good. You should feel guilty. You're supposed to feel guilty because you know that that is the absence of integrity. You were not consistent between what you said and what you did, which is why I say we lack integrity right now. And it's the biggest time in American history we lack integrity, is because there's more people now claiming values they don't live than ever before, right? We can go back and look, people believe some really crazy stuff back in the day. And it was obviously, we've progressed in a number of ways from a social and a societal way. But the one thing where we haven't is we've got a lot more people who claim things that they don't actually do. And that is a really big problem. And to me, it's no surprise why mental health and stress and anxiety is at an all-time high, because people know that they are in disconnection with themselves. And that's a big part of what I want to help people with is you do not have to go produce objective excellence. You just don't. Nobody cares. Not really. What I care about, and what I think everybody cares about, is, are you living the life that you want to live, being the person you want to be? That's what matters. From there, go build a simple life, go build a good life, go build an excellent life, go build a business, whatever you want to do, right? Like, be a third grade teacher, build a $5 million business, doesn't matter. But you got to get right here internally. Then you can go do that. But too many people get caught up in like the claiming of values and the claiming of beliefs and saying what sounds good. And they're not focused enough on the action, the doing, and the behavior side. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I love the way you tie that together. And I think it brings you to probably your favorite word, BK, is discipline. And I really like this quote of knowledge plus action equals results. Knowledge minus action equals nothing. So we can have all these conversations, 250 episodes here, and we could listen to every single week and love it and jam on the Mindset Advantage podcast. But if we're not doing anything with it, we're a step behind. I wanted to get into discipline. This is your home run hitter. So both discipline and shortcut are slightly polarizing words, you say. Discipline might make you think of a punishment. Shortcut could call to the mind the idea of cheating. But together, these words unlock life's fastest ways to get the things you want. The
Yeah.
shortest distance to get to what you want is the path of discipline. Talk to me here. I know this lights you up.
Yeah. I mean, I'll start with this. If you're driving, you won't be able to do this. But if you're not, you can have a good experience. If you're driving, just kind of, keep your eyes on the road and, pay attention to things, but like, let your mind, right? And if you're not driving, like, try closing your eyes and just like, let your mind find something that you told yourself you were going to do 2 years ago. Like you said, I'm finally going to do this. I'm going to take this seriously. Every one of us has at least more than one thing that fits this somewhere in the last 2 years, 3 years that you said, hey, I'm going to do this. And like, you were really adamant. You said, I mean it this time. And here you are today listening, and you've still not done that thing that you said you were going to do. And the reason you didn't do that thing that you said you were going to do is some combination of it felt too hard, felt too difficult, felt too long, felt too uncomfortable or painful. It felt too confusing, felt like too much work. And yet here you are 2 years later, all that time has gone by. You've still done a bunch of work, but you don't have progress or a payoff that's meaningful. And the time has still gone by. And how long ago does that commitment that you made but didn't follow through on, how long ago does that feel right now? Feels like yesterday. And so when I say discipline is the shortcut, that's what I'm referring to. What I'm referring to is, if I want the most reliable, accelerated path to anything, right? Healing a broken relationship, getting in shape, building a business, building a brand, building an audience, starting a podcast, writing a book, getting a raise, helping your kids, right? Like, get over whatever, some behavior pattern that they're in, whatever it happens to be. Here's what we know. Discipline is the fastest, most accelerated and reliable path to getting to whatever it is that you want, internally or externally. Because why? Because every other path besides discipline will take you longer or never get you there. Now, the word shortcut is in there because it's evocative. And I do it on purpose, right? We're rubbing two things together, right? The disciplined person knows there are no shortcuts, right? And the person chasing shortcuts lacks discipline. So I'm smashing those together, right? Because they don't feel emotionally like they're supposed to go together. But here's the point. If there is a longer path and there is a shorter path, there's a shortcut. One of the things we got to realize is this: you do have faster paths available. You do. I'm not going to sit here and pretend like it all takes 2 years. It doesn't. If Elon Musk listened to all the advice of everybody, he'd be like, well, I guess it's going to take 100 years to build SpaceX. And he said, no, F that. I'm doing it in 10. Guess what he did it with? Discipline. But what? To such an uncommon level that most people have no interest in that. And he's an outlier. Okay, fine. Tom Brady, you can't go to 7 Super Bowl. You can't play 22 years. Okay. All right, fine. I'm simply going to leverage my discipline up to do things that you're unwilling to do. He's a little lower scale, but still an outlier. Okay, fine. Ryan Holiday, you can't write that many best-selling books over this time period. Okay. Guess what Ryan Holiday does? He's been putting something out recently. I met Ryan years ago, and we've spoken on the sort of the different events and stuff together. But what I love about Ryan is that Ryan is very disciplined with the way that he uses his time, and he's naturally that way. I'm not. But what I really appreciate is, I just saw this the other day. Wakes up at whatever time he gets up, 6 a.m. I think he does a workout. And he kind of puts like his little schedule out there. And I think people over-index too much to like morning routines and schedules and stuff. And they try to copy too many things. Winston Churchill is my favorite leader of all time. He had 10 drinks a day and 10 cigars a day. And he woke up at 10 in the afternoon and went to bed at 2 a.m. He's a complete opposite. And he's the world's best leader in my mind. So like, I don't want to copy his routine, but like, a lot of things can work is the point. But what I love about Ryan is like, look, I make the decision when I wake up. I do this workout, and then I write, and then I spend time with my kids. Then I go back and I write. Then I do work on my business, and then I just laugh at the line. And he goes, and I don't leave my house after 7 p.m. Right now, that's probably a more rigid version than most people are going to do. But if you compare it to David Goggins' schedule, Ryan's fairly flexible, right? And so the reason is Ryan gets more out of his day, and then more out of his week, and more out of his month, and more out of his year, and he's more productive simply because he stays on the path of making the decisions to maximize the use of that time really, really, really well. But here's why. It matches his purpose, right? So I think some people will look at Ryan Holiday and be like, oh, I don't want to do that. Well, it's like, yeah, because you don't have Ryan Holiday's purpose. You have your purpose. So match your discipline to fulfill your purpose. If you're like, oh, I want to build something over 5 years, then sure, you can space it out. And maybe you're 22 and you want to enjoy yourself. Amazing. Have the discipline to shut work down and go have fun with your friends. That's discipline too, right? You know this from a workout perspective. Would you agree that a lot of people lack the discipline? I shouldn't say a lot of people. Some people lack the discipline for proper recovery, right? Plenty of people lack the discipline for proper strain, right? Other people lack the discipline for proper recovery.
Absolutely.
I make this point to people all the time. Like, how many of you struggle to put your phones and your computers down when you get home from work? And like all these hands go up. And I let them know, guys, it's the same discipline to turn work off and give your heart to your family and your time and your attention as it is to say, I need to push the fun stuff away. And not that work's not fun, but like, I need to push like the relaxing fun stuff away and get to like, I need to get to work. Discipline is both of those choices, right? So that's, to me, discipline as a shortcut is people want results right away. And they want that fast. So we already know that desire is there. This is simply trying to help people redirect that desire away from a short-term quick fix to where the real fast path is. And I had to I'll make this one capstone. You said it in there, right? The shortest path between where you are and where you want to be, between what you have and what you want, is the path of discipline. But hear this, sometimes the shortest path is still a long one. So I say shortest. That doesn't mean objectively short. It means we're now comparing what? We're comparing, do you want to take a 2-year path to your goal or a 10-year path? Okay. A 2-year path sounds pretty damn good when I'm comparing it to a decade later. But a 2-year path sounds awful if I'm comparing it to a 2-month fake path, right? So like in exercise, like I don't care where you are in 8 weeks, right? I talk about this a lot. I don't care where you are in 8 weeks because it doesn't matter. You're like, oh, I want to see my progress in 8 weeks. I'm like, it doesn't matter where you are in 8 weeks. What matters is where you are in 12 months. That matters. So do whatever you want for 8 weeks. Frankly, I don't even believe in measuring progress in 8 weeks for most people, especially if you're like losing weight. Don't even look. Put yourself on the work, put your head down, and lift your head up 12 months from now. You'll be very happy. But if you check every 8 weeks and you're looking to see the incremental progress, your mind is going to become your absolute worst enemy on that process. So do the discipline work, commit to 12 months, don't even look at progress and just go do the work. Let's check the before and the after on a 12-month timeline. That is as close to a guarantee as somebody could possibly get.
It sounds to me like discipline is a decision. And I think one of the biggest myths probably that you run across is that people think they either have it or they don't. It's something that I'm
Yeah.
born with or I'm not. And what you're saying, if I'm following you correctly, is that you choose it. You don't possess it. It's an act, not really a choice. So talk to me a little bit about the people that say, I'm just not a disciplined person, BK. That's just not who I am. Talk to me.
It's like anything else, right? It's like, look, we all have natural wiring. I love talking about this topic because have you ever done Strengths Finders? You know, the book
I have.
Strengths
It's been
Finders,
a long
right?
time. I did in college.
Yeah, been a while now. So I did it and I went back and I've done it. I think I did it in college and I did it. I don't know, maybe I did it when I was 30 and then I did it. Now I'm 40 and I did it. So I've done about basically somewhere like every 10 years or so. So what's super funny is, and if you're not familiar with it, Strengths Finders identifies, I think it's 36 strengths, and you take an assessment and then it ranks your strengths from top to bottom. Like here's your top, and they really highlight your top 5. Now they kind of pair it with your next 5 and kind of how they interact. Here's what's hilarious. I did Strengths Finders every time I've done it, 3 times, 20, 30, and 40. Discipline has never scored any higher than 34th out of 36 strengths for me.
Huh.
Right? Of all my strengths, of all the things I am naturally good at, discipline has never been higher than ranked number 34 out of 36 available skills for me. But what's interesting, and by the way, you could put that like self-control, right? If you just kind of let's swap discipline out for self-control. Yeah, it's not high on my list. 100% of my discipline, literally, and my self-control is learned, not natural. 100%. And like a lot of kids, I had my learning experiences growing up. And I had really great self-control. Football was my sport. I had really great self-control in football. And that brought that out of me. But not in school, not socially at any point, by the way. I was intelligent enough to get good grades, and I had enough energy to try on some things, but I was not a good student. And it wasn't until I graduated college that I started to see and realize if I'm not really good at making decisions across the spectrum in my life, I don't have a shot to get out of me what I am capable of. I just don't have a shot. Because in order for me to get something out of me, whether it be something I think is my best, or whether it was, early on, like I think I made I made $0 in my first, year out of college as an entrepreneur. I think after that, I crushed it. I made 26,000 in my second year working. And then I really hammered it and I made 31. Right. And I started getting feedback from the market and from the world of your decision making is not worth money. You don't make good enough decisions. You don't bring good enough action. You don't add enough value. Like, and all of a sudden, I've been broke many times before. And I learned, okay, what is discipline? So discipline gets confused. Anybody, and we could spend a ton of time on this. I don't want to burn it, but like, I'll just go straight to the point. We get taught all the wrong things about discipline growing up, especially if you grew up in like sports, but everybody at some point had some kind of school. And then depending on what kind of parents you had and how they taught you, unless you had enlightened parents who like studied the classics, they didn't teach you the right things about discipline. They taught you discipline as punishment, obedience to them, right? Follow their authority. Discipline wasn't figuring out what to do. It was doing what I tell you. Or discipline was compliance. Follow the rules. What do the rules say? Follow those. Well, dude, there's a lot of really dumb rules in the world. Bottom line, right? There's a lot of authority who is well-intentioned, but not educated. Okay. And so I got really frustrated by coaches. This is where it kind of started to unlock for me. Is when I played college football, I would watch sometimes coaches I would coach or that were coaching us, and other times I would like watch other coaches, but I would see coaches who were like authoritarian figures who'd never won championships, and they had big egos, and they refused, like they made players do exactly what they said. And I had like a very acute piece where it was like, players play, coaches coach, do what I say. And my head went to, well, if I just do what you say, the track record isn't real reliable that it's going to go in a good place. Right? Like I'll politely say. And it's not a criticism or a judgment of the guys. It was more just, for me, it was just kind of practical. It's like, well, if Nick Saban says, follow what I say, there's a reason 5-star recruits go to Nick Saban. Because guess what? If you follow what Nick Saban says, they have a pretty good record, right? Like you're probably going to get drafted and you're going to make a lot of money. And you're going to win championships. I think there was a, I don't know if it's still there, but for like 12 years, every single player who played 4 years at Nick Saban won at least one national championship.
Wow.
Every player. If you stayed 4 years. Some guys didn't because they only played 3 and whatever, but like every 4-year player won a natty. How's that for a recruiting pitch? If you come to, you're guaranteed a national championship. Pretty good, right? So the problem with that, though, is that in every one of those cases, the source of the decision is where? Internal or external? It's external. I am reliant on an authority to tell me what to do. That makes me weak. Makes me slow. It makes me, I can't make great decisions in the moment. I'm reliant on a rule being there. Or I'm only making decisions, and this is where a lot of kids get to, and then adults get to, is I'm only making decisions to avoid a punishment. That is the opposite of purpose. If you're just seeking decisions to avoid punishment, you are not, and you cannot, by definition, pursue purpose. So if we study the classics and we look at what the word discipline actually is, discipline comes from a Latin word, which is connected to the word disciple. A disciple is a follower or a student, right, of a study and a practice. That's what it means. Right now, disciple tends to have a more religious connotation today, but they only called those people disciples because they were students and followers of a particular practice of principles, right? Same thing with so if you take that discipline and the true intent and root word of that is a discipline is a study and a practice and a training. A disciple is a student and a trainee, so to speak, right? So discipline is the ability for me to adhere to a set of principles that who decides? Me. Now, if we're going to work together, we might set some shared disciplines, and we have a set of disciplines in our business or our team, but discipline at the individual level is not compliance to some external rule. It is adhering to, back to the point of purpose. And if I build out my core behaviors, what? define your core behaviors, then discipline becomes what? Not an authority, not a compliance. It becomes what? It becomes me aligning with the core behaviors I defined for myself. There we go. So discipline's 5 things. If we want to get better at discipline, there's 5 things we got to do. Number 1, discipline is choice. You are the decision maker. What's amazing about discipline is that yours does not have to look like mine. I'll give it like a good example. I have a 6-year-old and a 3-year-old. I was having this conversation with some people. Language is irrelevant to me in terms of like, I don't care about cuss words or what people call cuss. I don't care about those, right? People call them bad words. I don't call them bad words with my kids. My mom taught me a little something different. A word has the power that you give to it, right? And I had a mom who like taught me like, look, you can either be controlled by language or you can decide what language means to you, and then you go in that world. And I'm like, man, that was really helpful for me. So I don't care about language. I use whatever language. I just don't care. Now, I know that might bother some people, but it doesn't bother me. I make a decision about that. So I'm teaching my kids, not that they're bad words. I'm teaching that they're just words. You can decide what they mean to you. Now, understand, other people will have perspectives on those, but I make the choice to parent my kids in a way where I'm going to teach them about words rather than teach them and define for them that word is bad, right? I'm going to teach them how to treat people and then know how to separate. Like the word doesn't necessarily mean you're treating somebody. I could use the word dumb and be awful to you, right? But then use the word dumbass and be making a joke, right? Like, so it's not the word, it's who you are on the inside. So choice is number 1. Number 2 is what objectives or purpose are you pursuing with it? So you're leveraging it for a reason. I'm not doing discipline to avoid punishment. I'm doing discipline so that I can be happy and in shape and have longevity and be strong or whatever. So I make a choice and I attach that choice to an objective or a purpose I'm trying to pursue. Those are the first 2. The third one is standards. I establish what is my bar or metric that I must meet to be the person that I want to be. What I mean by a standard. What I mean by a standard is, let's just pick something that would be very practical. Empathy, great example. Like, what's my standard for how I treat other people, right? So one of the standards that I apply, I stole this from Nassim Taleb, right? We all know the golden rule. And then there's whatever, I forget, I don't know, the silver rule. Forget what it's called. I forget. Is it silver rule? Whatever it is, where people say, don't treat people how you want to be treated, treat people how they want to be treated. If I treat my son how he wants to be treated, he would get candy for every, right? For every meal. If I treat you how you want to be treated, you might not want to hear feedback because it's painful to hear. Well, now all of a sudden I'm kind of bound by your emotions and we got to be able to talk in the truth. So Nassim Taleb, he calls what's called the platinum rule. And I love this. Don't do to anybody else what you wouldn't want them to do to you. And you think about this. Don't ever do to someone else what you wouldn't want them to do to you. Okay. So it's this. If you tell me you're like, man, I got this big dream and I'm your boy, I could joke and laugh at you about your dream, but then I would have to say this. I would have to authorize you to make fun of me for my dreams. And I'm like, no, it's a little different. I'm not going to do to you what I want you to do to me. I'm not going to do to you what I would never want you to do back to me. Right. So if I'm fine with you doing it to me, then let's do it. Right? Like, I'm going to tell you the truth because I don't mind you telling me the truth. Right. I'm going to share hey, this happened because what? I want you to do that back to me, but I'm not going to do anything to you that I would not accept back from you. And this is great from like a coaching perspective. And I press coaches on this is, whether you're coaching an athlete or your kids or whatever. I think, for parents who are listening, it's a great example of like, don't ever talk to your kids in a way that you would not allow your kids to talk to you. And man, that one will bring it front and center. Because I watch a lot of coaches, like I go back on Bobby Knight is a good example of this, basketball coach. And it's heartbreaking for me because he's probably the best technical basketball mind of all time. But he coached in a way and treated players in a way that he would never allow himself to be treated by anyone else on this planet ever. and it lacked integrity, and it made him a hypocrite, and it cost him his credibility in his job. And heartbreaking for me, because I think ultimately inside, he's probably a good guy. I don't know him at all. He's probably a good guy. But what happened was he applied one set of standards to other people, and he applied a different set of standards to himself. That's as objective as we can say it. What that means and the judgments associated with it is up to other people. But that standard doesn't work. Right? It only works if you have power and authority and control. Very old school, archaic, literally like Roman level stuff. Okay. So choices, objectives / purpose, establish your standards. And then the last two is discipline requires effort. And this kind of goes back to, it's not a possession. Like I have it and it just shows up. That's why I'm very anti trying to create habits. Very anti. I think it's one of the worst things that's going on in the world right now. Man, that's overstated. One of the worst things going on in the self-improvement world. And then the last piece is skill. Is discipline brings to it, there's a craft to it. There's a quality. So the standard is not just yes or no, it's the effort and the skill that I put into pursuing that standard. So if I'm going to empathize with you, which is a standard I have to work really hard at it. And then what? Like there's a skill variability to it. I can be better or worse at it. And I have better moments and worse moments. Like there's a spectrum here. And so put those 5 things together, and all of a sudden discipline takes on a very different tone, a very different feel, and it takes the power from the outside and externally imposed on us, which is how it always feels, right? Touch the line, do what you're supposed to do, all the stuff that we got told in classrooms and sports. Now all of a sudden it puts all of that inside us and say, all right, DJ, what choice do you want to make? What objective are you pursuing? What's important to you? What's the top priority? What is your standard? What effort are you giving to this? And then how skilled are you at doing all of that? That right there, if you're doing those 5, regardless of the objective measure of it, you are in discipline. And then it's just a matter of, is your discipline at like a level 1 or is it like a level 10? Does that make sense? Right?
Absolutely.
That together, all of a sudden, I'm the one who decides all that. Now I can get coached and encouraged and pointed, and we can have shared and overlap. But I think Tom Brady is a good example of like, Tom Brady was great because he kept those 5 things in order, even while he was on teams where not every teammate was aligned on those 5 things from a team perspective, right? You have at the Patriots, you had the choices the Patriots wanted you to make. Like there's a definition of what discipline looked like at the Patriots, right? But then everybody brings their own personal discipline within that. And this is what makes teams interesting and families, is we have our individual and then we have our shared, and we want the individual to feed up to and align with the shared. But in the absence of somebody being really adamant on the individual and very clear on that, then what happens is the group imposes down on the individual, and the individual absorbs those or rejects them and resists them. So I like helping people define that at an individual level because it makes them better at 2 things. 1, aligning up to the team, family, group that they're working with. Or 2, it helps them recognize that their version of discipline is not a good fit or match or aligned with that group. And they either need to commit to themselves in an environment that's not going to support them. Happens in families all the time. Or in a team or company setting, you need to take that and you need to get to a place that you align with better. Because now that you're really clear on your discipline, you can see, oh, this group around me is not a place that aligns really well with that. And it doesn't mean they're wrong. It doesn't mean they're bad. It just means that your discipline and the discipline the group is asking for, expecting, or wherever their level is, those 2 things just don't mesh very well together, which is great. That's no problem. But go put yourself in a spot where you can do that better than, or you better be prepared to be isolated and be disciplined internally, which is just very hard for people.
Yeah, one of your quotes on Twitter, the more disciplined you are, the less normal people will understand you.
Absolutely. Right? Like I had a conversation with a colleague the other day. They were asking like what I eat or whatever. They're asking my workouts. And I'm like, look, if you looked at my workouts are not objectively, they're not, I put it this way. I probably work out a lot less hard than people like looking at me might think that I do. But here's why. I think it's easier to be disciplined in what I eat in what I consume than it is for me to work out. It's far easier for me to be disciplined in diet and food than it is for me to be disciplined in my workouts. And I believe that if I eat better, the demand for my workouts is just a lot lower. I don't have to work out as intensely to get the ROI. Then if I do work out intensely, I get like really big ROI. And so like, well, what do you do? And I just started walking through like what I eat. And it's like, dude, I spend zero time on like my diet. Like it's very, very simple. And I was just explaining it to one of my colleagues, and another colleague kind of heard walk by, and he literally looked at it and he goes, yeah, that's like an annoying level of discipline. That's like annoyingly consistent or whatever. And I just kind of laughed, and he was being fun, but I just kind of chuckled. But that's a great example of, yeah, no, I'm absolutely an outlier. Like if you have a bell curve, I'm absolutely on the far right-hand side in terms of how I eat, right? If it's 100% of people, I eat like 5% of people do, legitimate. I recognize that. My wife doesn't even eat like I do, right? My wife's good, right? But she's probably 20%. She's top 20%. But I'm like top 5% because I'm like, well, that's just easier for me to do than it is for me to go in and like have to do complex workouts and, 100 burpees a day and all this different stuff. Like I want to be able to do 50 burpees a day and get more ROI out of that than somebody who does 200 because they're climbing out of a hole. That's how I want to do it. And it's absolutely not normal. But I also don't parent normal. I don't want to have a normal marriage. I don't want to be an average business person. I don't want to be an average keynote speaker. I want to be the exception, right? That's what I want. Now, is there anything morally right about that? Nope. It's my choice, right? It's my choice. But you are where you are because of the choices that you make. And so I just want to equip people to say, look, go where you want to go, but you got to choose your way there. You're not going to fall in. You're not going to build a habit that gets you there. You have to choose. And I use this analogy. Tell me if this makes sense. Like, if we were to line up a bunch of dominoes, and this is why I push on the habit cease, and I'll let you pull this thread if you want, but like, why do people want to put habits in place? It's because what they want is what? They want to push one domino, maybe two or three, and then what do they want to happen with all the rest of the dominoes?
They'll fall over.
They want them all to fall over, right? And so the whole point of building a habit is so that people only have to push one or two dominoes, and then 100 dominoes fall in their lives. And that's not even close to how life works. So what I do instead is I say this: if I want a domino to fall, I have to push it. I don't ever expect dominoes to fall without my effort. Now, do dominoes sometimes fall? Sure. But I never expect doing something to turn into a habit that I no longer have to think about and just happens mindlessly. Like I get out of bed and I just work out, and I go to the kitchen and I just eat good food. Hell no. I go to the kitchen and I am ready. I can go left or I can go right. Make a choice. Alarm clock goes off. I get up and work out, or I get up and read, or I sleep in more because I need to recover, or I sleep in more because I lack discipline in making the decision. It's a choice every single time. I'm pushing that domino over. What's really cool is when I can push a domino over, and I push a domino over, and then like 5 dominoes fall, but eventually I come back to a domino that didn't fall, and I'm back choosing again. And that's what screws people up, is because they think, oh, 5 dominoes fell, the rest are all going to fall. And then they encounter that domino that doesn't fall, and they have to put effort in again, and they find themselves annoyed they have to give more effort. And I'm like, okay, well, that's because you want a habit. And if you just make it a choice, then habits are just a byproduct at some point, but you're never expecting it, which means that your mind is far more prepared to lean into that domino that didn't fall, and you go forward. So that's just how I think about that. And I find the dominoes are a good analogy for people, because people will spend 10 years being frustrated why dominoes aren't falling. And the whole 10 years, they're not pushing dominoes over. They're waiting for dominoes to fall with the littlest amount of effort. Whereas I'm the opposite way around. I want the maximum amount of effort. And then however many dominoes fall when I push, fine, I'll just push the next one over.
Cool. I want to end with a topic that we both jam on, something I teach in my seminars, and something you're really big on as well, is E plus R equals O.
Yeah.
Event plus response equals outcome. It's the way life works. Every day we face events and outcomes. We all get to choose how we respond. I love this topic, man. I think it hits really well with the younger generation, high school and college athletes specifically. But talk to me about E plus R equals O. This is a major part of your teaching in your seminars.
Yeah. So E plus R equals O has three components. It's a mindset, it's a skill set, and there's a speed element. So let's go piece by piece. The mindset comes first, because if you don't get the mindset, you're going to be too limited. Your skill set's going to be too limited. You're going to be capped. And you'll be, if the mindset isn't there, you'll be trying to deploy skills in ways they don't actually work, right? And then if you're lacking skill, then speed can actually get you in trouble, because you're going to go very fast into unskilled action, right? So let's start with mindset. Here's the mindset. And this could not be more simple, but it's like the wrestling with, like, is this actually true,
Right,
that
right.
we'll struggle with.
Hmm.
Here's the truth. I don't control events. So E plus R equals O is event plus response equals outcome, right? The mindset is this: I don't control events. I don't control outcomes. We'll come back to that. I control my response. The way I control my response is the single biggest influencer and impact over the outcomes I'm able to create. So let's unpack that for a second. I don't control events. True. Okay. I don't control events. I may be able to influence some of them, but there's a spectrum. I can't influence the weather. Obviously, I can't control any of them, but I may be able to influence you. Like, you're an event for me. I'm an event for you. And we can't control each other, but we can definitely influence each other, and we do all the time.
Yes.
If you have kids or your family, you don't have control over your family, but you do have influence over somebody in your family. There's a huge difference between that. Where do we get ourselves into trouble from a skill perspective? Trying to control things we don't control. I push back on the statement, control the controllables. I don't like that statement, because it opens people up to think that they control something other than themselves. Whereas I'm very clear mentally and emotionally, and I'm acceptant of it. I only control me. I don't control you. I don't control a listener. This is why I don't have fear of public speaking. I don't control what anyone thinks of me. I control the words I say. I control the way that I say them. I cannot control your perception. Can't control the bias or mood or preference, or I don't know, maybe you don't like guys with beards, or maybe you don't like tall guys, maybe you don't like white guys, whatever. I can't control anything other than me. So when I'm dealing with an event, what I look at the event is the event, including the people in it, is I look at it as like a playing field, a map, board game. It'd be like trying to control events would be the equivalent of playing Candyland and then getting mad at the colors of the squares and the existence of the cards. You're like, no, like, that's just the construct. It's what it is. If you don't play it. I'm like, well, let's play a different game. Okay. Well, then you're just going to get a different construct. So I view it all as like, oh, this is just the construct of where we have to operate from. Number two is I don't control outcomes. Very easy test. And we're like, yes, I do. Okay. If you controlled outcomes, what would your bank account look like?
Right.
If you controlled outcomes, what relationship in your life would be in a better place? And you can really crank this up, DJ, right? Like, if you controlled outcomes, who would still be alive that you love? If you controlled outcomes, how would the country be operating right now? If you controlled outcomes, why are you not in better shape? Right? Like, just get very, very practical with this. And a lot of people will confuse controlling outcomes for controlling responses with things other people created. Somebody said one time, I control outcomes, watch this. And they went to the light switch and they did the light on and off. They go, see, I control whether the light goes on or off. I said, no, you control what button you push. But if that wiring wasn't working, that somebody else put together, you would have no capacity to make the lights come on in this room. You don't control anything other than you pushing that button, okay? Just like I control how I speak to you, I control how I talk right now, that's up to me. What I can't control is how your audience hears me. There's a huge difference. Okay. But if I want to what? If I want to create the best outcome, then I need to engage in the best response, which is the last piece. I control my response. And when I am engaging in the right response, and so what E plus R equals O recognizes is we don't control events, we don't control outcomes, but our responses create them. And this is where the mindset really struggles for a lot of people, is the difference between you can create outcomes, but you can't control them, right? I can create value for people, but I can't control value for people, right? I played college football. I can create a good play in football, but I can't control the play. But if I play really well, I create a good outcome. That's very different than controlling it, because the other guy, he's trying to manage his response to create a good outcome as well. And it's his response against my response. Now we're going after it, right? It's in sales, right? It's if there's two people competing for a sale, it's their response versus their response. Who responds better to the E to create the O? It's who gets a better response, right? So that's the mindset. The second piece of E plus R equals O is the skill. And here's the skill in very direct terms. Again, could not be more simple. And this applies to, you can overlay this, why I like E plus R equals O. I'd be curious to hear your perspective on this. I like it because it overlays, to me, I view it like the Matrix and like gravity. Like it is like the green code going up and down the world at all times. And my job is to just recognize the code in the moment using ERO. And it's this, the usage of it, we read English left to right, but the usage of E plus R equals O is not left to right like English. It's not waiting for an event and then figuring out a response and let's see what outcome we get. It's strategic. It's starting with the outcome. What outcome do I want here? That goes back to where we started of purpose, objective. What are you after? So I'm looking at, what do I want? Then I look at the E. I don't start with the E. Easiest difference is this. A lot of people wake up in the morning, they look outside at the weather, and then they decide what kind of day they're going to have. I wake up and I say, what kind of day am I going to have? Then I look at the weather. See the difference?
Bingo.
If it's raining and snowing and freezing and miserable, there are a lot of people, Minneapolis, right? There's a lot of people who have already made the determination today's going to suck. And they've literally like bound themselves to this very low quality day based on something as dumb as the weather. Whereas I'm like, and I do this with my son, I'm like, okay, what's the weather? Oh, it's pouring rain. We are going to have an awesome day. We're going to go outside. We're going to do this. It's going to be cold. We're going to be like, can't feel our fingers. And we're going to what? We're not going to let the E dictate our day. I'm not going to let a delayed flight dictate my emotions. I'm not going to let somebody giving me, harsh feedback at a keynote saying he's the worst keynote speaker of all time, which they do all the time. Plenty of people do. I'm not going to let that dictate it. I'm going to look and say, well, what did I want to do? I wanted to impact a lot of people. Great. Well, how many people got value? 490 out of 500 got value, but those 10 people hated you, literally hated me, right? Okay. So it's outcome. So the order is outcome first, event second, and then given those two factors, what's the response? Football. I need 9 yards for a first down. Context is it's 2nd and 9. I got 3 more plays to get there. Now I got to go. Boom. Sales, same thing. And then the last piece, this is where I get really fired up. The last piece is speed. So if I get the mindset right, then I can access the skill. But if I'm trying to control things that I don't control, because my mindset is trying to control other people, I'm not deploying my skill well. This is where I get excited about this. It's not just a matter of how strong your response is. It's also a matter of how quickly can you engage in a good response. How does it take you a day to figure out what a disciplined response looks like? If you sit in your bed and there's two things that you probably saw this recently. The more you negotiate with yourself, the more you lose. Nobody ever negotiates themselves up, right? I was talking about this. I work with a Major League Baseball coach, and we talk about this a lot. Nobody's ever in the middle of a workout and they start negotiating about reps, and they negotiate themselves to do more reps, right? If somebody's doing burpees and you start saying, well, how many should I do? Nobody's like, do 50 more than you planned on. No, everybody's like, I'll do 10 less, right? So the first is like no negotiating. The second piece is this: recognize there are some situations where the more you think, you cannot make a better decision by thinking more. If I'm in bed and I'm deciding whether to work out or not, the more I think, I can't make any better decision by thinking more about it. The answer is yes or no. Thinking more isn't going to improve the quality. It's just going to make me say yes, or it's going to make me say no. So the speed to a response is often, if you can engage in a good response quickly, your chance of delivering value goes way up. And I use the example of relationships. And like, if you're ever kind of in a tension relationship with somebody, it's an easy example is, have you ever figured out, are you married?
Yes.
Have you ever figured out, what's your partner's name?
Ashley.
Ashley. Have you ever figured out what you wish you would have said to Ashley like a couple days later, where you're like, oh, I should have said this. Why did I say that? You're figuring it out later.
All the time.
Yeah.
It's a learning
So
process.
it wasn't that you didn't have the skill and you didn't have the capacity and you didn't have the, the intuition. It was that what? In the moment when emotions are high, or, whatever, pressure's on, whatever's going on, you're like, it's just hard to access sometimes. And so the skill was there, but what? It was the speed of deployment. You needed more time and space and thought to get, oh, there it was. So if we can like make that happen a little faster, we can actually really improve the quality of that moment. Now, how about the other way around? And I'll put Ashley on this one, right? She's not here to defend herself. But has Ashley ever said something she maybe not should have said a little too quickly? Like she maybe like hustled into a statement that maybe like in retrospect, she's like, I wish I wouldn't have said that so fast. Sure, right? So the point is, we can be skilled, but a little too slow in the deployment, or a day late, right? Or we just didn't do it in the conversation, and then we have to recover. But we could also go way too fast with too low quality of a response. So we can have a high quality, but too slow, or we can have low quality and way too fast. E+R equals O's real magic is pairing the mindset with the skill, and then training ourselves to be able to access that discipline, make that choice, and deploy a skillful response at the speed that life requires. And you know this from a gym, the same kind of thing, right? There are people who can do very good clean technique as long as they can do one rep at a time and they're not exhausted. But when you start making them having to do more reps, faster pace, and when they're fatigued, what happens to the quality of the rep, right? They either go really fast and it's sloppy, or to stay at good quality, they have to slow way down. But what? The people who have built and trained themselves to be strong and endurance and know how to do it, they what? They've built the discipline and the skill and the capacity to do really high quality reps at speed, and they're a lot better for it, but it came through training, not because they willed themselves to it.
Mm-hmm. I love the way you spelled that out. I hadn't heard it that way before, where it's outcome first. I like that a lot, BK, because it seems like E+R=O. One could say, if you want to really dissect it, that you're kind of just waiting for the event. You're not proactive. You're just like, well, whatever happens, then I will. And yes, I think that is there is still value in that order. However, if you want to take it a step further, I like the way you flipped it there.
Yeah, look, my dad was diagnosed with stage 4 prostate cancer in April of 2020, like right after the country shut down for everything. And that was like a big E that we have to respond to. It wasn't like we weren't saying, well, what outcome do we want here?
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, it's like, well, let's just kind of deal with cancer along the way. Like
Sure.
Maybe at like the big life perspective it was, but like in that moment, the E is front and center. It is like the E is like the defining thing. And then what? It's the kind of E that changes the nature of the outcomes we're pursuing now, right? That's part of life. So, but I think that's like 10, maybe 20% of life is an E like that. Traffic doesn't qualify for that for me. I'm not looking at traffic and be like, well, what outcome do I want now that I'm in traffic? No, do not end up in traffic and then have to redefine an outcome because you're in traffic. That's a very weak life, right? No judgment, but that's like weak. Like, if I compare dealing with traffic and dealing with cancer, and I compare these two things, because ultimately, like, I knew cancer was going to come into my life at some point. I didn't know who, if it was me or my kids, my wife, my dad. And the first really big one for me as an adult was my dad. But here's where I get from a mindset. Maybe this is like a good capstone. If we're not prepared to deal with traffic or a delayed flight or what somebody tweeted, what hope do we have when the phone rings that you or somebody you love has cancer? Because the head that you deal and the heart that you deal with traffic with is the same head and heart that you're going to deal with that phone call with. And so for me, everything is training for something. So when I'm in traffic, I'm not just dealing with traffic. When I'm parenting my 6-year-old or my 3-year-old, I'm not just dealing with them. I am dealing with the 25-year-old version of them, because that 6-year-old is going to know how I was in those moments. And if I'm weak in traffic and it's everybody else's fault in traffic, you think I'm going to accept responsibility for what I need to do when I get cancer? I can't even accept responsibility for how I act in traffic. Now all of a sudden I'm dealing with life or death for my dad and our family. And like, how do I talk to my kids about that? And I've only got like my muscle memory is it's everybody else's fault because somebody changed lanes or a car got in front of me or a light turned red. And so that's probably going to step on some toes. But the point of this is like, I want to like shake people. Like I want to rattle those beliefs and be like, yo, dude, if you're getting disrupted by a delayed flight, life is going to be very, very hard on you, very hard on you. And it's already hard enough. And so bringing discipline doesn't make life wonderful. Life is already wonderful. Bringing discipline helps you create excellence and create fulfillment in all the challenges and all the adversities and all the opportunities and all the wonderful parts of life, because ultimately we're going to experience it all of it. We're going to get cancer. We're going to get, right, like great opportunity, right? We're going to have really great business deals. We're going to have really awful business deals. Your kids are going to be amazing and you're going to feel this great love. And then the kids are going to tell you that this is why they don't like you. Like we're going to experience it all. If you can bring discipline through all of that and build the strength internally, now all of a sudden that fulfillment is one decision away. Excellence is one decision away. And maybe this is the capstone, is for all the long-term stuff, which I'm a huge believer in, and I mean, it's a separate conversation. What I'd like to leave people with is this. I think discipline's ultimate value, more so than all the long-term stuff. And maybe I like this because it's the different message, because people like to talk about, discipline is sacrificing now for what you want eventually. Okay. And yeah, I believe in that, but man, that's a lot of life lived, not getting what I want, right? Like that's a lot of life lived separated from fun stuff. I look at both, and I like to take two things that people say are opposites and I like to put them together. Fulfillment is one choice away, one decision. You can access fulfillment any moment you want. You just have to make the decision and look at it that way. Excellence is one moment away. If you get up at 5 a.m. and you go work your ass off in a workout, that is excellence defined. Embrace that. Now, is that going to take you across the finish line? No. But it's still excellence. So just remember that you can access fulfillment and you can access excellence. And you can access discipline in one choice. But you have to be the author and the decision maker of that choice. And if you are, nobody can take that or steal that away from you.
Awesome. Phenomenal. I want to end with one thing here. So we're both in agreement that the R is your response and your response is your responsibility. And so what I want to do is give people, I like to end my shows, BK, with some applicable action items. So you talk about what you shouldn't do in the R. You talk about B, C, D. I want to go through that. So what you shouldn't do in the R. And then I also want to leave with a high note. What should you do in the R? So can we go through those two things as we kind of skate away?
Yeah. So BCD is blame, complain, defend. No blaming, no complaining, no defensiveness. That's the standard. And me direct and point blank. Justify your blaming, justify your complaining, and justify your defensiveness. If you want to, just say this. And I was actually writing notes down. I've got it here, right? Like I was writing notes last night in bed, like at midnight, trying to make sure that the light from my phone wasn't shining on my wife and waking her up. But that hits me, so I got to write stuff down. Here's the thing. If you complain, you are a complainer. You know who doesn't complain? People who aren't complainers. I like to do this like, this is your brand. It's your brand. Decide what brand you want. If you want the right to complain and you want to be able to complain, I will not judge you. I won't judge you, but I will call you a complainer because you are. So if you don't want to be a complainer, don't be one. Don't do it. And I find that, and I've written a ton of stuff about this, but a lot of people ask, well, what should I do instead of BCD? And the answer is, I don't care. It doesn't matter. Nothing. Do zero. Better than that. Like, nobody ever asks. Nobody ever calls me and says, hey, BK, what should I do instead of, going cliff diving over some rocks today? And they're like, what? Nobody would ever ask me that. What should I do instead of skydiving today? The skydiving seems very risky and scary for me. Just don't skydive. You can do anything else. Go do whatever. Same thing with BCD. Just don't do it. And if you need a good emotional reason, I'll give you one. There is not a single person in your life who wants more of it from you, but there's a lot of people who probably want less. And it's a hard thing to tell you, hey, you blame, you complain, and you get defensive, and it makes it very, very hard for me to talk to you. People don't like to say that, but they're thinking it. And they're thinking it because you have people in your life that you think that about, that you don't say things to because they're going to get defensive and you don't want to deal with it. So don't be that person. That's number one. Number two, what should we do? Here's how I, from a response perspective, because response is always very context dependent in E + R = O. Here's what I've sort of something I've asked people to do a lot more recently because I find a ton of value in this is, and I haven't talked about this in any podcast, so I'm actually excited to talk about this, is write down your top 10 priorities. All right, and you're going to go through 3 cycles on this. Write down your top 10 priorities. Just write them down. Get a piece of paper and just write them down. Say, here are my priorities. Write them down. It's like, well, what reference point should I use? The point is, no, I want you to start from scratch. I don't want to give you a guidance. I want you to look inside yourself, and I want you to just start writing down and defining your priorities. Because we live in a world where we can do anything. So if I give you a framing and a guiding, you're not going to be applying that to the world. You're going to be like in a very narrow band. Write down your top 10 priorities. That's cycle 1. Then the second time through, take that list of 10 and rearrange them into a true priority list of those 10. So the first time you're going to write down 10, but you might write down on number 9. By the time you get done with all 10 and you go through the second round, you're going to look at whatever you wrote down as the 9th thing. It might actually be the second biggest priority in your life. It just kind of, for whatever reason, didn't come to your mind until then. So the second time, you're going to rearrange the list into a true priority order list. The third time around, what you're going to do is you're going to ask yourself for each one, starting with number 1 compared to number 2. Am I willing to trade some of number 2 to ensure that number 1 happens? And it's a real pressure test of the top 10 priorities. In other words, let's say physical fitness was number 1 on your list and spending time with family was number 2. Here's the question you've got to ask yourself, because this is the world we live in. Am I willing to trade a little time with my family to ensure that my physical fitness is peak? If not, then you need to put those in a different order. Family 1, physical fitness 2. Am I willing to trade a little bit of my physical fitness to ensure, in other words, what we're asking DJ is this: if those 2 things come into conflict, which one wins? And rather than trying to decide in the moment, this is back to discipline, rather than trying to decide in the moment where we are subject to impulse and mood and feelings and influence and persuasion and all this different stuff, right? It's like don't go to the grocery store hungry, right? Don't watch commercials when you're hungry, because Burger King looks like a good idea in those moments, right? Until you eat it and then you're like, that was not a good idea. Decide beforehand. Pre-make the decision. Oh, if I'm ever feeling tension between family time and working out, I choose family time and then I find another time to work out. Boom, decision made. And create that list of 10. So 3 cycles. Create your list of 10 priorities. Cycle 1. Cycle 2, go through, rearrange them into a priority order. Cycle 3, rub each one against 2 2 against 3, 3 against 4, until you have definitively, just for yourself, identified the top one. I will trade everything else on this list in some way, shape, or form to ensure that top one happens. I will trade everything below number 2 to ensure that number 2 happens, right? Maybe not 100%, but like if there's ever tension. Now all of a sudden, what you've got is you've got a guide that shapes your response. And it's like, you created it, you authored it. No one's going to hold you to that, but you. Now all of a sudden, like, you can own that. And you say, all right, this is now my number one guide for behavior, action, decision-making, purpose, direction. I'm good to go. What I find is really interesting on that, this is going to bury the lead just a little bit. Here's what do you think would not show up? What do you think is something people do a ton that would never show up on their top 10 priorities?
Sleep.
Like something people spend a lot of time on, a lot of time with, they do a lot, and they do prioritize right now. If you just audited their life, that probably wouldn't show up if they wrote down their 10 priorities.
Maybe sleep is where my head goes. If they're conscious of recovery, sleeping.
Some people, no. I guess I'm saying, what's something that people do prioritize right now?
Oh.
They do it a lot right now.
Oh, okay.
It's something that doesn't take a lot of their time, attention, and energy. But if they were to build this list, it probably wouldn't make it onto the top 10 priorities in their lives. But if you audited, it is a top 10 priority for them in if you watch their behavior.
Yeah, I'm not sure. What do you think, BK? What do you got?
TV.
Yeah.
Top
sure.
10 priority, my life. Make
Yeah.
sure I get to watch all my shows.
Yeah.
But look how often people prioritize watching their shows. I don't have time to work out, but I never miss an episode of Housewives. Game of Thrones, watched it till midnight last night. Why didn't you work? You watched it from 9 to midnight? You watched 3 episodes? You had time for Game of Thrones, but you didn't have time to work out? You're full of shit. I love you. I love you. I have to say this. So if you build a top 10 and all of a sudden you're like, HBO shows, number 4. Amazing, no judgment, but you got to put it there, right? You got to put it there. There is time for HBO shows, but I think you'd be hard-pressed to put that in the top 10. Now, look, my brother's a screenwriter and he loves movies. My brother probably would put like consuming really cool TV and movies and stuff because it's just what he loves to do. It's a huge part of his mission and purpose. Wonderful. If you're just like a regular person, Monday Night Football until, 12:30 a.m., probably not on your big priority list. But boy, feeling better might be. Maybe you went to bed at 9 and just watch the recap of the game. So in other words, like you're just rubbing those two things together. So I think this is it's like doing like this little audit and setup. That's a good way to like shape the response without being, I don't know, regimented on it. Which I find a lot of people struggle with the regiment side of things. I don't like that personally. So maybe I'm influenced by it. So that's what, no BCD, and then build your priority list and go through those 3 cycles and see what comes out. Like, feel like you're exploring yourself. I think that's a good mindset to think about. Feel like you're exploring yourself. And then you're going to pressure test what actually comes out and see if it really stands up to scrutiny of your own scrutiny.
Awesome. BK, I got a page full of notes, man. This is awesome. Where can my listeners learn more from you, and what are you working on right now?
So you can learn more, on social. You can find me at @TBrianKight, KIGHT, anywhere. I write a daily email called Daily Discipline. It's at dailydiscipline.com. It's about the length of a phone. And the point of it is literally just teaching individual disciplines. This week we're exploring beliefs. Tomorrow's, today's message technically. Yeah. Today's message was around what is a belief. Tomorrow's message is around how we don't decide what to believe based on what's accurate. We decide what to believe based on what is comforting or feels comfortable for us. Because when our comfort bumps up against a belief that would remove our comfort, we tend to stay with the comfort and sacrifice the belief a little bit. So you can sign up for that. It's free, dailydiscipline.com. And then what I'm working on right now is actually something really interesting called the Daily Discipline 60, is building a community. We've got a big community, but building a community where everybody can come in and identify one discipline, one action, to do one time a day for 60 consecutive days and seeing if we can get 6 of those in a year so that we can activate discipline as the shortcut. And it could be something as simple as wake up at 5 a.m. for 60 days in a row. Doesn't matter. It's whatever it is for you. It's so everybody can come in anytime they want, start their clock on 60 days and bring it. But what it is it's teaching people how to push one domino over at a time on one thing. But the vision is if you attack a single discipline for 60 days and you do that for a year, what happens is you have now activated 6 different disciplines and had 6 different experiences that you otherwise might not have gotten in 10 years. And you've done that in 1 year. And in building a community where people can share how they are, what discipline they're applying. We'll calling it the DD60. And it's just a place where people can talk about, hey, here's what I'm doing. Here's why, here's what my experience is like. And then people can learn from each other and share in, right, their struggles, their failures, their rewards, the excellence and fulfillment that it delivers. And then, hopefully, I would imagine that if you came in and did it, that I would see something you did and I'd be like, man, that's awesome. I love that. I'm going to make that my next one. When I get done with, walking for an hour outside every day for 60 days, I'm going to do that one that I saw DJ do because I think that would be good for my life. That's what we're building right now in a community where we can share in activating discipline in very practical ways without necessarily targeting, letting people choose the discipline they want to do. And it could be physical, could be emotional, could be mental, could be relational. It's totally up to you, but you're going to come to a place where everybody is doing something around that.
Cool. BK, this
Yeah.
is fantastic, man. Thanks for taking the time. Really appreciate it.
Yeah. Thanks, DJ.